Under the stadium lights, Quincy Promes was a star, quick on his feet, scoring big goals and admired by fans. He had played in the Champions League, earned 50 caps for the Netherlands, and was living a life of fame and fortune. But off the pitch, a darker side of his life was unfolding. He was linked to drug trafficking, involving 2 shipping containers carrying 1,000 kilos of cocaine. And he was also accused of stabbing a family member at a party. Despite the serious allegations, Promes continued playing, posting on social media, and smiling as if nothing had changed. This is the story of a Dutch footballer who had everything, but still stepped into the world of crime. Quincy Promes was born in Amsterdam, but his roots were in Suriname. He grew up in Bijlmer, a tough part of the city filled with tall buildings, narrow streets, and kids with big dreams. Football was everywhere, on pavements, car parks, and any patch of grass they could find. From morning till night, Promes played non-stop, copying tricks, learning moves, and living for the game. His father had played in Suriname, and while his mother scolded him for skipping school, even she knew he had real talent. By 16, he was impressing at a local club and was soon picked up by Ajax's famous youth academy. But while his talent was never in question, his attitude was. He argued with coaches, broke rules, and thought skill was enough. Ajax let him go, a moment he later called the worst day of his life. He almost quit, but his mother convinced him to keep going. At 20, he got a second chance at a smaller club where he began to grow. Then came a big break. In 2014, Spartak Moscow signed him on a 5-year deal. He adapted fast, scoring goals and winning trophies, becoming a star in Russia. In 2017, he was the league's top scorer. A year later, Sevilla signed him, and although his time in Spain was short, it didn't matter. Ajax came back, paying nearly 16 million euros to bring him home. He also made it into the national team, earning 50 caps and playing alongside big names like Van Dijk and Memphis Depay. On the surface, he had it all: money, fame, and respect. But off the pitch, things were changing. He showed off his wealth, but no one questioned who he spent time with. In public, he was a star. In private, something darker had already started to take shape. Quincy Promes looked like he had it all: luxury holidays in Dubai, diamond watches, and supercars. He didn't just play like a star, he lived like one. Every photo and video he shared was perfectly polished. But behind the glamour, things weren't so perfect. People close to him said he had changed. He was now surrounded by new faces, not real friends, but people more interested in his money than his football. He showed off his wealth online, but questions started to rise. Prosecutors noticed that his earnings didn't fully explain his lifestyle. It wasn't just football money or sponsorships, something else was funding it. Quiet rumors turned into police investigations, and soon there were reports linking Promes to organized crime in the Netherlands. One name kept coming up: Piet Wattel, a key figure in Dutch drug trafficking. Quincy Promes was born in Amsterdam, but his roots were in Suriname. He grew up in the Bijlmer, a tough part of the city known for its high-rise buildings, narrow streets, and kids chasing big dreams. Football became his way out. He played everywhere: on pavements, in car parks, even on worn-out patches of grass. From morning till night, he chased the ball, weaving through alleys, trying new tricks, and playing like everything depended on it. His father had played football back in Suriname, while his mother wanted him to focus on school. But even she couldn't deny it. Her son had something special. By 16, he was already standing out at a local club. A scout noticed him, and soon he was wearing the famous Ajax badge. But while his talent stood out, His attitude held him back. He argued with coaches, broke rules, and believed that skill alone would carry him. Ajax let him go. For Promes, it was devastating. He called it the worst day of his life. He almost gave up, but his mother encouraged him to keep going. So he did. At 20, he started again. A smaller club, less pressure, more space to grow. Then came a call from Russia. Spartak Moscow, the country's biggest club, offered him a 5-year deal. New language, new country, same hunger, and it showed. Goals, assists, trophies. By 2017, he was top scorer in the Russian Premier League. The fans adored him. He was a star. Then came Spain. Sevilla signed him in 2018. It didn't last long, but it didn't have to. Because Ajax came back. This time, paying 16 million euros to bring him home. Now he was more than just a talent. He was a national player. 50 caps, 7 goals. Sharing the pitch with Van Dijk, Wijnaldum, and Memphis Depay. He was part of the Orange, playing at Euro 2020. Off the pitch, he lived large. Designer clothes, luxury holidays, fast cars, the fame, the fortune, the following. But with status came silence. No one questioned who he surrounded himself with. No one asked what those new connections meant. Because in public, he was the star. But in private, something far darker had already begun to grow. Later, Dutch prosecutors claimed that Promes paid 250,000 euros to a man named Wortel, settling a drug debt after a shipment was stolen in a RIP deal. We'll come back to that. Criminologists weren't surprised. They'd seen it before. Money, fame, and young athletes attracting dangerous people. But this case was different. It wasn't just who Promes was, it was how bold the story had become. In court, prosecutors laid it out. This wasn't a footballer brushing up against trouble. This was a man at the center of it. But again, we'll come back to that. At the time, police didn't have hard proof, just whispers, tips, movements, and a growing list of names. Then, January 2020, 2 containers landed in Antwerp, and everything they'd been watching suddenly came into focus. It started with a whisper. A single name passed through an intel tip. Antwerp, Europe's back door, a port where cargo slips through, and not everything is what it seems. In January 2020, 2 shipments arrived from Brazil. On paper, sea salt. But inside, over 1,360 kilos of high-purity cocaine, split across 2 containers. The first held 650 kilos. It vanished from the port, quietly, moved to a nearby warehouse, untouched. The second container wasn't so lucky. To the naked eye, it looked clean. But imaging told a different story. Buried deep inside, 713 kilos of cocaine. Hidden with precision. Authorities moved fast. They tracked the first container to its drop point. A raid followed. Inside, 650 kilos confirmed. Now they had evidence. 1 container caught, the other long gone. Investigators raced against time. They traced IDs, scanned logs, matched entry records, shipping times. Belgian and Dutch teams began to stitch the puzzle together. This wasn't luck. The containers were moved with military precision. Offloaded, redirected, secured for collection. Whoever planned it knew the port, knew the system, knew exactly when to strike. Now, with 1 container seized, the case had gone from suspicion to reality. The physical proof was in place, but behind the cocaine, names were still hidden. The digital hunt was just beginning. Ask Chat, GPT. Now investigators had more than just cocaine. They had a trail. Customs passed the container data to Dutch intelligence. From there, the real search began. not for drugs, but for people. Phones had already been seized, devices linked to the warehouse, to the port, to names under the radar. Most were Blackberries, loaded with encrypted messaging apps, the go-to tools for organized crime. Investigators began digging. Deleted messages were recovered, chat histories rebuilt, and slowly, the network began to take shape. One name kept appearing in the background: Quincy Promes. He was never seen at the docks, never caught touching a single package, but in the chats, there were references to someone funding the operation, to someone in charge. One message spoke of a €200,000 investment. Another mentioned half the load lost, matching exactly when the second container was seized. Police followed the trail, location data, bank transfers, contact chains. They matched trafficker activity to a number registered to Promes. His full name wasn't used, but the slang, the timings, the money, it all pointed in one direction. Then came the final link. A known trafficker, Pierre Wartel, had Promes' number saved in his phone. Wartel denied everything, but forensic analysis told a different story. Calls were made, messages sent, during the exact window of the shipment. But before the trafficking case could fully land, one violent moment from Promes' personal life would drag him into court, long before the cocaine ever did. Ask ChatGPT. It was meant to be a family gathering. Summer 2020, Abcoude, a quiet town just outside Amsterdam. Relatives came together in a rented hall. Food, music, smiles, and something simmering beneath it all. At some point that night, Quincy Promes got into an argument with his cousin. The fight was over a necklace, not just jewelry, but something personal. Something tied to family pride. Words turned into shouting. Then came the knife. Promes stabbed his cousin twice, once in the knee, once in the leg. One of the blows severed a tendon. Blood poured. The young man was rushed to hospital. He survived, but the damage was permanent. Doctors said he'd never move the same again. No more running, no more sport, just pain. And the memory of a cousin who turned violent in seconds. He wasn't just any cousin. He'd once looked up to Quincy. Now he feared him. Police didn't know about the attack right away. They only found out by accident, from a wiretap. Promes' phone was already being monitored in a separate investigation. That one call changed everything. In 2023, the case reached court. Promes didn't show. He stayed in Moscow. His lawyers claimed it wasn't planned, but prosecutors said otherwise. They said he spoke with pride, even warned others they'd get bullets if they crossed him again. Attempted murder and manslaughter were dropped. But the court still found him guilty of aggravated assault. 18 months in prison, sentenced in absentia, no apology, no appearance. And while this case played out in one courtroom, another, far bigger one, was quietly building in the background. By the time both cases reached court, one thing was clear. Quincy Promes wasn't coming back. He stayed in Moscow, still training, still playing for Spartak. While prosecutors laid out the evidence, he never took the stand. He never even entered the country. The first trial ended in June 2023. Aggravated assault. The court found him guilty of stabbing his cousin during a family party in Abcoude. Prosecutors said he showed no remorse, that he even took pride in the violence. The court agreed, 18 months in prison, but he wasn't there to hear it. Just months later, a second trial began. This time, the drugs. 1,360 kilos of cocaine shipped from Brazil to Antwerp. The court heard how Promes had invested in the deal. His encrypted messages were recovered. He'd even calculated the loss when the second container was seized. Prosecutors asked for 9 years. The judge gave him 6. Both sentences delivered in absentia, rare but legal. Dutch law allows it when a suspect avoids justice and the evidence is undeniable. Promes denied all charges through his lawyers. They promised appeals and reminded the public, until the verdict is final, he is innocent. But outside the courtrooms, frustration was boiling. A footballer, convicted twice, still flying, still earning, still untouched. He hadn't sat in court. He hadn't answered questions. He wasn't behind bars. And the silence was growing louder. Just months after his assault conviction, Quincy Promes was back in court. This time on drug trafficking charges on an international scale. In Amsterdam's district court, prosecutors laid out the case. They didn't say he was connected to the drugs. They said he was part of the structure that moved them. This wasn't about one message or one payment. This was about timing, control, and intent. They started with logistics. 2 shipments, 650 kilos, and 713, already intercepted. They showed records, timelines, encrypted messages, financial movements before and after. They mapped his locations, brought in analysts, flagged suspicious transfers, large withdrawals from accounts linked to Promes' known businesses. The defense pushed back. They said he never touched the containers. He didn't give the orders. The messages were circumstantial. But the judge disagreed. In the final ruling, the court said Promes was directly involved. He didn't need to move the bricks himself. He was higher, the organizer, the investor, the one who let others get their hands dirty. Prosecutors asked for 9 years. The court gave him 6. Again, sentenced in absentia. No appearance, no testimony, just evidence, and a player still on the run. But the case didn't end there, because conviction is one thing. Bringing him back to serve time is another, and that's where the real battle begins. The response was fast. Ajax, the club that once paid 16 million euros to bring him back, issued a statement condemning his actions. Other teams went quiet, but behind the scenes, they changed things. Academies brought in ex-police officers to talk to young players, not about football, but about the streets, about the traps waiting at the edges of the game, because now Promes wasn't just a footballer, he was a warning, a lesson, a name that echoed through locker rooms as a reminder of what can happen when the game isn't the only thing you're playing. As we mentioned earlier, Promes had left the Netherlands long before both trials, back to Russia, back to Spartak Moscow, still playing, still posting as if nothing had happened. Dutch authorities issued a warrant. Interpol put out a red notice, but Russia had no extradition treaty. Promes remained untouchable, scoring goals, living in luxury above the law. Until he slipped. March 2024. During a training camp in Dubai, Promes was flagged while trying to fly out. He was arrested, not for drugs, but for a local traffic offense, but the Dutch red notice was waiting. Negotiations started, and though he wasn't jailed, he was stuck. No travel, no escape. June 2024, Spartak Moscow cut ties. He signed quietly with a second-tier Dubai club, but his freedom was shrinking. The walls were closing in. Then came June 2025. It was over. On the 20th of June, Quincy Promes was extradited back to the Netherlands, escorted, handcuffed, processed, placed into Dutch custody, and this time, he was there to hear it himself. 6 years for cocaine trafficking, 18 months for aggravated assault, to be served back-to-back. No early release, no suspended term, just prison. His legal team filed an appeal. But unless it's overturned, Promes will remain behind bars until at least 2030.